Well, good day to you. It is January the 20th, 2024. Hope you're having a great day wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to do two things. I want to first welcome everyone to this channel. I'm happy you're here. And secondly, I also want to say, if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, look into it for yourself. I've included links in the description portion of these videos to hopefully make it a little easier for you to get some background information or to see if there's any truth to this information. Check out the links in the description because they take you to websites that really do that in some way. Now, if you want to come back and join the discussion, post your comments. Let me know what you think. You can also post questions in the comment section too, and then I'll try to answer it in the next video. And or you can send me an email at searchforsigns@mail.com. All right, now I did have a few things that came my way, some questions and a couple comments and so forth, and I wanted to kind of talk about it. So RawZ33, I always appreciate your thoughts on and questions because I can tell you're listening to these videos. But what did you ask? You said Buddha was overshadowed. By who and where to find that info? All right, so first and foremost, let's talk about we're going to talk about overshadowing here after I explain where to find this info. Is 90% of my information that I talk about on this channel, when it comes to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings about things like the Buddha being overshadowed, Gautama being overshadowed by the Buddha, or Jesus being overshadowed by Maitreya, is coming from the Benjamin Creme books. Maitreya's Mission Volume 1, 2, and 3, I think, are the best books to get the background information that you would probably need for this. All right, so that pretty much hopefully answers that question about where to find the info. But you might be able to find some of the information in the Alice Bailey books as well, but you'd have to dig a little bit harder for that. All right, now the Buddha, to correctly answer your question, sir, when you said the Buddha was overshadowed, Gautama was overshadowed by the Buddha, just as Jesus, when he was in Palestine, was overshadowed by Maitreya. Now, what is overshadowing? For those of us who don't know, overshadowing is a technique that these masters use to, for lack of a better word, insert a bit of their consciousness into the being of a very advanced disciple, can communicate through that disciple who's out into the world. Because remember, these masters for millennia have guided and directed humanity indirectly. Okay, so as they were moving the plan of evolution along over the centuries, they did it through their disciples, whether it was just inspiring that disciple while the disciple was asleep to do something, whether it was to bring about a political idea, discover an invention perhaps, or create some form of artistic expression or something like that, which happens all the time. People don't realize where these inspirations are coming from, what is really truly their muse. A lot of times people attribute it to God, or they'll attribute it to themselves or whatever, but it's coming from one or other of these masters who is inspiring that disciple by planting the idea, inspiring that person through mental impression while they're asleep. Now, the other way, which is a more specific way, and the disciple has to be highly trained and very advanced already to be able to do this, where they are trained to be able to communicate the ideas and thoughts of one or other of these masters directly through telepathy. And when they're overshadowed by one of these masters, the bit of their energy is sent out into the world through that disciple, perhaps stepped down a wee bit, but still very powerful in and of itself. Won't be quite as, it'll be like, when we see the masters directly in the world, I'm sure they'll still overshadow disciples to some degree, but we won't need to receive information from a secondary source. We'll be able to receive it directly from one or other of these masters, such as Maitreya. But 2,000 years ago, humanity wasn't ready for these masters to come out again in the world. So for example, Maitreya overshadowed Jesus and gave the teachings of Maitreya through Jesus. It's of course attributed to Jesus. Jesus knew who Maitreya was, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, knew he was being overshadowed, and it started from age, I think, 12, and was more or less complete at the age of 30. And then Jesus lived for 3 years and gave his teachings out for 3 years, and then was, of course, killed on the cross in that way. Now, there were times that Jesus was doing the talking. There was other times that it was Maitreya who was talking through Jesus, and Jesus's consciousness really, he was fully conscious at the time, and this is part of the training of the disciple to be able to do this, where he can step to the side and let his master talk through him or give a teaching or whatever. Ben did it all the time. And in the last video, I talked a little bit about it. And for those of us who knew Benjamin Creme for years, you could tell the difference when it was Ben and when it was his master. Maybe not 100% of the time, but you could tell often, you could tell a lot of times when it was. The energy was different. The quality was different. Sometimes even the words that he used was different, but it was still his voice. And sometimes it was just a look. I mean, I was riding in the car one time with Ben, and I said something to him, and I was talking to Ben, but I believe it was his master who responded back to me when he was talking about one of the illusions and glamours of a disciple who he had just been around at a party, and Ben was making fun of him. And instead of me going along with the joke and being self-righteous, I was being honest with Ben, and I said, I have every one of those things that you just said. Every one of those glamours, that you said, which is glamour is illusion on the emotional plane, where what we think is real really isn't real, and that's what glamour is. So anytime you think yourself to be separate from another individual, that's how glamour starts. But anyway, so he and I were driving in the car, and he was making fun of this person in this group who's passed away now. And rather than me going along with it, I said, Ben, stop you right there, man. I have every one of those things that you just listed out. And I believe it was his master, because the way he said it, it was just like, it hit me right in the heart. And it also gave me a lot of hope. But he looked at me, and he gave me a different look than Ben gave. And he goes, you'll get it, Gary, don't worry. So, I know I'm kind of going around about in a way of talking about what overshadowing is, but I'm talking about it from a personal experience that I had with Benjamin Creme. Now, other disciples who had been, according to Ben's master, had been overshadowed by one of these masters and gave a series of works out into the world. A lot of them were artists. Rembrandt was overshadowed by Maitreya, painted up to 80 some odd self-portraits of himself. And when he was when he was doing these self-portraits, he was, a lot of times, I don't know if every time, but a lot of times he was overshadowed by Maitreya. Maitreya actually painted his own eyes into the painting as a way of communicating obliquely through, a masterpiece work of art that he was coming back into the world at some point. Quite extraordinary, but yet art is really, the spiritual purpose of art is unknown at this moment in time. Will eventually be awakened in all of humanity. We'll see art in a way that we don't normally view art today. But anyway, so Rembrandt was overshadowed by a master and given his work out into the world in that way. Same thing with Mozart. Mozart was overshadowed by his master, and a lot of his work, maybe not everything that was written by Mozart was overshadowed by a master at that time, but a lot of it was. Bach was overshadowed by a master when he was writing his works. In fact, Ben even went so far to say that if you listen to the Brandenburg Suites, the Ageless Wisdom Teachings is expressed in musical terms, whatever that means. But if you listen to the Brandenburg Suites, he's communicating the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, whether it's the laws of life, the law of cause and effect, the need for harmlessness. It's all written in his music and that kind of thing. Quite extraordinary. But inspired and written mainly by one of these masters and working through Bach at the time. Shakespeare the same way. Benjamin Creme the same way, was overshadowed by one of his masters. And it's been said that the Gautama Buddha was overshadowed by the Buddha, who was the first person on this planet to become a Christ. Maitreya was the first of our humanity to become a master, and then eventually he took the path to become a Christ himself. The Buddha is actually not from this planet. He's from the moon chain, when the moon had humanity on it. It's now, that planet is now dead, circles our planet, but there was a time when that was teeming with humanity and teeming with life and so forth, and the Buddha became a master and came from that evolution. And while he's been here on Earth, has taken the time to work his way to become a Christ, just as Maitreya had done it. But he did it first, and then overshadowed the Buddha at that time. So the Buddha was the Gautama Buddha was the manifestation of pure wisdom in its perfection for the first time in humanity. Just as Jesus, because he was overshadowed by Maitreya, who was a Christ, then became Jesus Christ toward the end of his life. He wasn't known as Jesus Christ at the beginning. He was known as Jesus Christ after the baptism. And was the perfect expression of love in humanity for the first time. Not the last and only time, but for the first time in humanity. Quite two extraordinary sons of God who lived on our earth, who taught humanity at that time. But if you want to know more Raw Z33, definitely check out Benjamin Creme's books. Now, let's see. There was somebody who commented and kind of asked me my thoughts and then took it away. And I'm trying to remember exactly how they put it. They were talking about chemtrails. So if you're the person who put this in there, I can't remember your name. I'm so sorry, because the names don't come up. There are channel names on YouTube now that I see. I don't see somebody's name. I just see the channel name. So a lot of times it's a bunch of numbers and gobbledygook. But anyway, somebody had asked what my thoughts were on conspiracy theories and chemtrails. And what I would say, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I'm sorry that you took it down, because I really was wanting to answer it more directly. So like I said, if you're listening to this, if you want to repost it, I'll try to answer it better for you. But from what I remember from what you asked, and then I started thinking about it over the past few days, how I would answer this. My thoughts on conspiracy theories, I'm kind of right in the middle, and always have been, in terms of, some conspiracy theories I'm sure are true. Some are probably bogus, for lack of a better word. And it takes discernment and intuition to really know what is real and what isn't real, And it's not just conspiracy theories, but it's pretty much with everything. I had talked about glamour and trying to address the last question, about the Buddha. I talked about glamour, but glamour is illusion. It's not, what we see. Ben had said this one time at one of the conferences. We would be surprised how little what we see and what we feel and what we recognize and experience in the world is really, we'd be surprised at how little of it is actually what's really going on. Even just time and space are illusions. We're living in we're not living in a world of illusion. Our perception of the world is mainly illusion. Perception of ourselves is mainly illusion. And so a lot of those conspiracies are illusionary. And you have to, okay, this isn't real. And it's for each and every one of us to kind of go through the minefield together, in our own way. And some we'll think are totally real. And then as we start to move on, we'll realize that they're not real. And that's the path that everyone has to take to become a master. These masters don't experience illusion at all. They see life as it truly is. Totally open-minded. That's why they live life with nothing but joy and creativity all the time. They never are pulled back into a bad day and then are miserable and are grouched like we can all be from time to time. Or never get too elated about when something goes their way. They're totally detached from the result of it. But it comes from the steps in order to be able to do that. You would have to follow the steps in the basic teaching of Maitreya to practice honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. But conspiracy theories come out of illusion for the most part. Now, is there any truth to the historical facts of some of these? I'm sure, I'm sure that, but most of it, I also think, to bring it back down to the everyday, planet, on 2024 and not go too far off into the ethers about illusion and glamour, but just to talk about your direct question or try to answer it more directly. I do think that the outcome of conspiracy theories on the internet, it's a symptom. It's a reaction to an action, meaning that the government has lied to its people for so long in so many ways, whether their intentions were good or for nefarious reasons. They lied to its people, so much so that the people stopped trusting the government. We have to deal with the government because it's in place and it's there. We don't want to, most of us don't want to just scrap the United States and live in a state of anarchy, but yet the United States has lied to its people, hasn't it? Has made itself out to be the beacon of truth and justice in the world, and tried to perpetuate that ideal. But it was an illusion, and it's always been an illusion. The reality is somewhat darker and, more violent perhaps, but does the United States have a purpose? Yes, the United States has a divine purpose, and it is living through it on the way to becoming its divine purpose. But we're talking millennia from now, not just, it's not going to happen in the next 20 years or with the next presidency or whatever. I mean, all that stuff, we're working towards something. And as dark as it can seem sometimes, as it is today, in terms of what's going on in the United States government and the political divisions and so forth, the United States will be here thousands upon thousands of years from now because it has a spiritual purpose. Most countries today have a spiritual purpose, but even though the ideological differences of each country might be totally different from one another, which is going to lead me to my next question that somebody asked about the point of darkness in Israel. Okay, but the conspiracy theories in and of themselves, chemtrails and all those kind of things, I would say just you have to use discernment. And the only way you can really decide whether it's real for you or not is you have to be detached, and you have to try to live life without fear. Now, you can't just say, I'm going to live today without fear. But if you're full of fear, you're going to be drawn to these kind of discussions and theories about things that are probably not real, because they're mostly coming from a fear base. Does that make sense? So, for instance, I'll give you an example. William Cooper, if you know who he was a person who claimed to have had all this inside information about the United States and the inner government and the Illuminati, he called it, and their treaty with aliens, and that the aliens were abducting people and all this stuff. I mean, he had a book, The Behold the Pale Horse, and I've discussed on it before because I read it a long time ago. And it sucked me in at the time because I didn't know much about anything. And I was like, oh my God, if this is real, we're all screwed, right? And I had thought about it and chewed on it for decades, actually, after that. Even knowing Maitreya and having all the experiences that I've had with Maitreya, one of the experiences I had with Maitreya was about conspiracy theories. And I asked him, is it real? And, his response to me was somewhat different than I was hoping, but in his way, he was saying there's no truth to what William Cooper is saying. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, no, I stumbled across a video where William Cooper, and it was definitely William Cooper, he was being interviewed by this young lady. And it was an audio video on YouTube where he admitted that there was no truth to what he was saying. And I guess in a way it takes a lot for somebody who spent his whole life perpetrating this conspiracy theories that he had, about things, claiming to be on the inside in government, and knowing all these things because he was a part of naval intelligence and so forth. But he came out and said there was no truth about aliens that he had said. In fact, he had said that he didn't think that aliens really existed. So why was he saying all this stuff all the time? I don't know. But it's just you gotta be real careful about what you are, what you take in, because, and this is how I'll leave this discussion. Ben's master put it like this: fear and joy are equally infectious. They infect us. When somebody perpetrates a fear, and a lot of times those fears come in terms of conspiracy theories about government or the deep state or the Illuminati, it spreads like wildfire. It's a contagion, really. But yet, there might not be any truth to this. Now, do I think that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in assassinating Kennedy? No, I think there was probably more people involved in it, than that. So, that's why I would say you just have to kind of use your discernment, use your discretion in terms of whether it's real or not. And then you don't need somebody to tell you whether they think it's real or not. Does that make sense? So hopefully that answers your question, whoever you happen to be. Now, lastly, let's get on to the point of darkness in Israel. So Jerry Wells said, I absolutely get there are issues in the Zionist movement, but it seems to me that Jews are more tolerant of Palestinians than Palestinians are Jews, in my opinion. Please give me your thoughts. Okay, so what is he talking about? And I've mentioned this in several videos, is there were 3 points of darkness during World War I and mainly World War II, that the Antichrist energy was released out into the world at that time. One point was in Germany and the Nazi Party. The other one was in the fascists in Italy, and then the militarists in Japan. It wasn't the emperor in Japan, it was the militarists in Japan, according to Ben. Now, when the Axis powers were defeated toward the end of World War II, that energy resurfaced in 3 more points of darkness. One in the Pentagon, which nobody ever contests that. You know what I'm saying? It's always the Zionist movement in Israel, whenever time I bring that up. And then the Eastern Europe, somewhere around the Baltic states, like it used to be Yugoslavia, but like Bosnia or Serbia, maybe into Ukraine. It's not just limited to that one point. Whether that's moved or not, I don't know. So some people have claimed that it moved to Ukraine. But anyway, and then the third one was the Zionist movement in Israel. And to really get down to your question, Jerry, I would say this. The lords of materiality are just like masters, except for one thing. They are devoid of all love. So they have the spiritual awareness of the masters, and they're very powerful, and they can manifest things just as these masters can manifest. They don't overshadow their disciples. They obsess their disciples. They can communicate through their disciples, like 2 of them did through Hitler, but it was an obsession. Hitler didn't have the free will to be able to say no. They took him over and communicated through his speeches in that way, and they were very influential in influencing the German people at that time through his rhetoric and his speeches. But a lot of it wasn't Hitler, it was these 2 dark lords doing it. Now, they are just as detached about sides as the masters are. So just because the point is in the Zionist movement does not mean that they don't have influence over the Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever's the terrorist organization in Palestine at that time. So we think in terms of right and wrong, black and white, left and right, this side, that side. So if I'm on this side, then I'm working against that side. When in essence, it might not be like that from the Lords of Materiality's perspective. Just as the masters don't take sides. So the masters don't side with the Democrats against the Republicans. In fact, Ben's master talked about the point of darkness in the Pentagon influencing the presidents over the decades that the Pentagon has been in existence. He said they've influenced every single president. Didn't matter whether they were a Democrat or Republican. It was just that the Republicans were more easily accessible to being influenced by that point of darkness than the Democrats. But they were using both sides. So I would say it would be probably more than likely the same thing. If you look historically at what Israel has done to the Palestinians in Gaza Strip, it's the injustice has been, I wouldn't say without precedent. There's been precedences for these kind of injustices before, right? One was perpetrated on the Jews in Germany and Europe, during World War II, but they've turned around and done the exact same thing to the Palestinians that was done to them in Germany, and that's the historical fact of it. The propaganda, the opinions that the mainstream news media has, our politicians give out and so forth, well, it remains to be seen. But I would say you would have to kind of step back and look, and it's not a question of this side versus that side. It's just a question of that's where that point is. That's exacerbating all the problems in the area. And if there are people on the other side that are susceptible to that dark force, they will be just as manipulated by it as the ones on this side. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that they know, the Lords of Materiality know that if there's no peace in Israel, then there will be no peace in the world. So when there's no peace in the world, then the masters can't come back into, the masters are about peace, about creation of oneness on of humanity, in humanity on earth, bringing it down to the physical level through the principle of sharing. And when there's this conflict and that conflict and this conflict and that conflict and money being thrown into these conflicts in the way that it has been, the principle of sharing will never take place. Do you see? So it's going to take a change of priorities on humanity in order to bring about the principle of sharing and thus bring about goodwill and justice and those kind of things. So if you look at what's going on with the Pentagon, the influence that they've had over all the presidential foreign policy over the last 50 years, it's just been disastrous. Disastrous what's been going on. So you have two parties, both being influenced by this nefarious energy in the Pentagon. It doesn't mean that they're siding with the Republicans and they want the Republicans to win. They just want the division. You know what I mean? So a good example would be the environment. The Republicans, politicians, are getting paid from the same people that are trying to keep the changes from occurring and happening, as well as the Democrats do. So you look at Trump got paid from oil companies just as Biden's gotten paid from oil companies. And it goes right down the line, all the way through Congress and everything like that. Both sides get paid by big pharma, who doesn't want universal health care, or, the oil companies who don't want to see any kind of change in terms of environmental policy in the United States, being influenced by this force of darkness in the Pentagon. But the lies that they perpetrate out to the people are different. Okay, so the Republican lie is that there is no problem. Therefore, nothing needs to be done about it, right? There is no environmental problem. Global warming or climate change is something that just happens, although the masters would say it's 80% caused by man and is very destructive. Where the Democrats would say there's a huge problem, we need to do something about it, and then when they get in the power, they do nothing about it. Why? Because they're getting paid from the same companies as the Republicans are. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's the same kind of deal in terms of what's going on in Israel and Hamas. So I would say don't get hung up on where the point of darkness is. Just understand that it's causing the problem in that area on both sides. There are good people in Israel and there are good people in the Gaza strips as Palestinians. They're wonderful people. Their governments aren't. You know what I'm saying? Their governments are just as corrupt as every other government on the planet. It's just that one government, the Israeli government, the Zionist government, is being influenced directly by this point of darkness that's causing this problem. But I'm sure they both have their issues in terms of responding to that energy. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers that question. I love you guys. Thank you very much. I didn't want to get too long-winded, but I ended up doing it anyway. You guys have a great day. Stay warm out there. Stay classy. I love you again, and take care. And I look forward to putting up videos in the future. And before I go, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And don't put up a question and then take it down, because I love answering these questions or trying to answer these questions as best I can. You guys take care. Enjoy the day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.